I no longer go to work, guys. Like, it's a great feeling. I go to be with my friends every day, and we get to make a difference in an industry that we love. Like, that's special. That's unstoppable when you're up against the competitor that's not motivated for a financial outcome. You're just motivated because this is what you want to do.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Built by Humans. Today we have Adam Harris, one of the founders and CEO of Cloudbeds. If you haven't been paying attention to Cloudbeds, it's time to wake up. I remember Adam when they were just starting their company. They were an early troops power user, and boy, they're just become a breakout company in the travel and hospitality tech space. This episode to me is really interesting because Adam has been doing this kind of distributed global company thing that a lot of us find ourselves in for the first time since the early days of the company. And so we talk a lot about, what it means to really become a global company, how to think about not just systems for your business, but systems for your people and creating a system of people. And a lot of lessons learned along his hypergrowth startup journey.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, with Adam, not only does he share a ton of wisdom on how to, build a fantastic global company, but I also just love hearing from entrepreneurs that are building something in a space that so many people touch and so many people are passionate about, which is travel. And the fact that he was able to, add value and revolutionize that industry is just really special. And so it was really great hearing from an insider on how all that works and what he's doing today.
My guess is many of you have used Cloudbeds and you don't even know it. But we'll let Adam talk all about that. So let's get into the episode. Here's Adam Harris. Hey, Adam, how's it going?
Awesome. How are you guys?
We're awesome. And we're thrilled to have you on the show. I remember when we were starting out Troops, Cloudbeds was an early adopter. You guys were, a small but mighty San Diego company. And here you are, one of the fastest growing global software as a service companies out there. And doing it with the views of La Jolla, which is epic. So maybe just to kind of frame it up, what's Cloudbeds? So
first of all, I remember the day that our Slack used to light up for the first time with Troops every time we got a deal solidified. And Scott, I remember our early conversation. So it's awesome to see how far you guys have come as well. But what is Cloudbeds? Early in the day, both founders, Rich and I, have this desire to get out there and experience the world. I've been to like 62 countries in the world. It's something that has 100% shaped myself and who I am today. I got to be my dad's road buddy when I was little, which is part of the reason I've been to so many places. And, both Rich and I believe that everyone should experience travel in some degree. And some of our favorite properties in the world tend to be the smaller ones, the ones that are off the beaten path. They're not the big box that looks like the same rectangle or square, depending on how they're shaped, from a Marriott or a Accor or from a Wyndham or whatnot. And so we had this aspiration to help these small independent hoteliers bring their inventory to consumers like the three of us on this call. And what we realized was there wasn't this democratization of software, meaning the big hotel brands weren't sharing what they were using all the way down to these independents. And so we built it from scratch. And so the best way I could describe it is soup to nuts. We provide everything a independent lodging business needs to run their business more effectively. And we combine that in a simple to use experience that's delivered through a platform. And we're one of the best in the world now. And it's been quite a decade this September of a run.
Wow. What an anniversary. And just so people get a sense of kind of scale the business, could you give a range of like how many hotel partners you guys work with globally? I don't know if you have how many countries you're in. I know you
Sure.
guys are a global business.
Yeah, to kind of put in scale, we power about 2.5 million beds around the world in 157 markets, which puts us in the range of being one of the biggest systems of record for hoteliers in the world. The count of properties is a little bit nuanced because I could have a bunch of little vacation rentals that get counted as individual properties. So, what we tend to do is just talk about the fact that we're in 157 markets, which is nuts. 2.5+ million beds, which is nuts. And that's powered by 750 really, really motivated employees that surround Rich and I. And we're just humbled by that journey for sure.
That's amazing. And I think, one of the things that we talked about, you're a lot of founders, and even in my own experience, I think, the journey of an entrepreneur is doing something and then figuring out how to create a system around it, so that you can basically do more of that more efficiently. And one of the concepts that we talked about that you brought up in a prior conversation was this idea of creating a system for your people. And I think that's something that I hadn't heard before that I thought was really unique. Could you describe that in the context of how you've thought about growing Cloudbeds?
Sure. So Rich and I have been running a remote business for over 15 years. Even prior to Cloudbeds, our little sort of tech consultancy that we ran had developers in Brazil and developers in Ukraine, developers or UI and product people in Estonia. So we were fully distributed with our resources. One of the things that we promised ourselves with Cloudbeds that we wouldn't stop is that remote first or remote always concept. And that's what we are. We are very much a remote org. We win cultural awards for that remote org. It's been fun to see us evolve, but we have 70 or 750 plus people in 46 countries today, right? And when we talk about systems of people, we never wanted to lose sight that being a global company or leveraging the global landscape of talent meant that we could tap the right person irrespective of geography, right? Which is why we have so many countries worth of staff members. And the trick is finding this sort of community of individuals that are like-minded with shared values, but then also work together in great systems, meaning I might have someone who's a visionary in one area, and then I might have a strategist, and then I might have someone who's an operational excellent. So combining those three people really creates a nice blend of three things that you need on all team. You need someone who's inspirational, you need someone who's strategic, and you need someone who's really good at operations. Now, you could get one person doing two, but you can't get one person doing all three, is our belief. At least I've never met that unicorn. So, when we talk about systems of people, it's really about bringing together individuals who form really good tribes, right? Our tribes are our equivalent of a squad. And we can bring them together to create a maximum output. And over time, we adapt those systems of people. So even though we're remote, we do use time zone and we use how they interact with each other to build those tribes to maximize what we're ultimately trying to accomplish with them. And so there's a little bit of science there. There's a little bit of just dumb luck too along the way. But, we use tools to help us understand behavior. We're very thorough in our interview process. One of the things that we do is we tend to get senior leaders up front in the interviewing process. So we might have a recruiter reach out, but then the hiring manager or the most senior person on that team will go first. Because what we're trying to do is understand how they're going to fit into that system. And if ultimately they're reporting to that senior leader, whether it's indirectly or directly, we want buy-in from day one from that ultimate decision maker. And we also think it's a level of respect. We want to show them people that we're serious about recruiting. We want to get this right. And those systems are really important to us.
Yeah, Adam, honestly, I love the idea of putting the most senior person up front. I guess when I think about it a little more, in terms of those roles that you just outlined, right? The visionary, the inspirational person, the operations person, is there an order of operations with which you think you should have when you're hiring that team or that tribe? And then secondly, is there any sort of 2-to-1 ratio, magic ratio that you're going after with regards to those people?
Yeah, so it's not so much like a 2-to-1. It's actually more of like a box. I wish I could pull up a graphic, but I'm not going to. But think of it as like two boxes, right? So on one half, you're going to see the more champion-like personalities that are going to be up and to the right, and then you're going to have the much more operational, strategic thinkers who are sort of down and to the left. You can get a visionary who's strategic. You can get an operations person who's strategic. And the sort of the strategic line is sort of the middle quadrant of it. And so what really you're trying to do is counterbalance. And so if you had, here's the line in the sand, I want a bunch of people over here and I want a bunch of people over here. What I don't want is a big cluster in one side or one side down here either. And so we try to do a really good balance. It doesn't really matter if it's 2-1 on one side or 2-1 on the other. What we find is the best performing teams tend to be a little bit more heavy on operations and the strategic thinking and less on the visionary. Visionary is very quick in our minds, meaning great ideas, cool. Let's go interact and operate on that. That takes a tremendous amount of more effort. Coming up with the cool ideas is I feel like the small part of the development of whatever you're going to go out and do. So when it comes to those roles, the senior leader should be one or the other. They should be either the operational expert or the champion of why that team is there to do something. And so having them go first allows them to figure out what their counterbalancing hire is. And so we do it for all senior leaders, and we do it for all managers, and we also do it for all individual contributors as well. So it's something where we've made this part of our recruitment process because we just believe it doesn't matter if you're an IC or you're a 100-person team leader, department head. It's just something where we calibrate quicker for that talent pool on who we're ultimately looking. And so, we recruited a VP of product. Both Rich and I were intimately involved in recruiting that individual. Hundreds of candidates went through. Rich talked to all of them. And then I came in a little bit later on in the conversation, and he was actually texting them along the way as well to calibrate how much interaction they were having with us because we wanted to get it right.
Well, that's an important one to get right. And the thing that I can't help but think of is self-awareness in that process. And I just can't, I'm thinking of all these people that perhaps that I've worked with in some capacity in my career that, maybe think that they're super operational, but they're really a visionary, or think that they're a unicorn and they really have a huge gap in their skill set. And so my question, I love this idea. It reminds me of like a basketball team, right? You don't want to have 5 centers. You got to have a point guard. You got to have a big guy. You got to have, maybe someone that can pass the ball, but it's really that kind of combination that's the magic, where the magic happens. How do you account for the concept of whoever that hiring manager is being aware of their blind spots and having the humility to admit that they're not perfect?
I think great leaders have humility, right? We're servient in that nature. We are the ones who eat last, and we do anything to create the environment for the other person to be successful. And in turn, we're successful. So I would probably describe myself being more strategic or on the vision side, less operational. Even though I can do the operations, I just don't geek out about it. I don't live every day thinking about how I can tweak a process or make something more efficient. That's not my MO. My MO is like, what's next? How does that evolve? What's the next step to bring it to the next level? What can we strategically do for the business? Like, even after our conversation with you, Scott, I was thinking about where Troop fits into the ecosystem, and would that be a great fit for who you and I talked to at the time? Like, my brain just works with in that manner, and I have nothing to do with Troops except for being a customer. So at least at Cloudbeds, and probably even with your executive leadership team, you probably are pretty humble about where you all fit in, and so. Take it this way. Our entire sales org goes through software where at the last step of deciding whether or not, meaning like confirmatory, we're going to hire this person, we pull up what's called predictive index, which is a behavioral study and a cognitive study that we give every one of our sales reps. And based on the role, we know if they're going to be successful at Cloudbeds. And what we do is we then match them to a leader who will help them be successful in our system. And like, we can get it down to like three types of personas inside that ecosystem based on all the hires that we've done in those areas. It's amazing. I've taken it. I've actually done the behavioral stuff, and it's scary when you read it back to yourself. So if you want, I'll send you it afterwards, and you can quickly fill it out, and I'll send you the report if you're curious. But it'll blow you away. You're like, oh my God, I'm talking about myself. And it's just about gravitating towards words and things that you sort of recognize with. And so, like, look, is it a perfect system? No, but I do believe that if you're not humble and have a sense of humility as a leader, it's going to eat you alive.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think there's just immense freedom and leverage to just know thyself and don't be ashamed of it and lean into it.
Yeah.
You know, like that's right. Where you're going to be happiest. It's where you're going to do the best work. It's where you're going to have the most energy. And for me, I think, like, you know, maybe the first 10-ish years of my career were figuring out what that was. And the sooner you figure out the things you're good at and things you like and lean into them, the better results you're going to get. And so you know, nothing wrong with not being good at something.
I was a cocky shit when I was younger. And I realized, like, sure, I had some great ideas, but I had to harness those great ideas. I didn't know how to present those great ideas. I didn't know how to even articulate them in a way that was directional. It was like, yeah, this would be super cool, but I didn't understand the cost and what it meant for the company and the political behind the scenes aftermath, how you rallied the people. Like, none of that came until I got into the school of hard knocks with starting Cloudbeds, right? And then it kind of all clicked, and I was like, oh, I get it. Yeah, no, none of that stuff that I talked about back then actually mattered. And then all the things that I thought mattered to people was wrong. And then that's when motivation and total rewards and creating community of people that got along became more impactful to their careers than 10%, bump in salary versus the competitive market. I mean, so, like, this has been amazing. Like, I no longer go to work, guys. Like, it's a great feeling. I go to be with my friends every day, and we get to make a difference in an industry that we love. Like, that's special. That's unstoppable when you're up against the competitor that's not motivated for a financial outcome. You're just motivated because this is what you want to do the rest of your life. I hope Cloudbeds outlives Rich and I. And that's a crazy thought. I mean, I got to live a lot more years ahead of myself, but, like, that's our goal. I want to see some other generation run this company in the future.
Yeah, that's the dream. So, I want to dig in a little bit more on some of the things you just, mentioned. The one thing that I would love to hear more about is just these notions, these ideas that you had before starting Cloudbeds, things that were proven wrong, hypotheses that were proven wrong over time. So you kind of touched on that a little bit with the pay bumps. I would love to hear a couple more examples and how, they were shown to you.
I'm trying to think of how many different bosses I've worked for in my life. It doesn't really matter. Some of them I would emulate with my eyes closed, and they did things that I didn't think mattered at the time, but now looking back, I sometimes forget that I hold a very important title at Cloudbeds, and I scare the bejesus out of people when I just, like, directly slack them, like, hey, can I chat with you? And they're like, I send them into a frizzy. I'm like, oh my God, Adam's reaching out. Like, what does it mean? Am I getting fired? And I've never done that once, but oftentimes I scare people. So I lose that sight of context, or I did lose sight of context. So I used to have a boss. He'd come into my office every week, and he would just chat. He'd just chat with me. I didn't directly report to him. He was the sort of head of all of the region that I was part of. And he was just like, what's going on in your life? Anything new? How's your family? Anything I could do for you? And he just was there, humble as ever, in a nice suit. Didn't need to, but he was there. And, like, in hindsight, just the 5 minutes of interactions a week were probably my fondest memories at that company. And I was there for over 2 years. So that was interesting. And then I worked for other bosses that gave zero shits about you socially. I mean, personally, socially, no regard. You're just a number in their system. And those are the reasons why Cloudbeds doesn't operate the way that company did. And that's why we win more awards than that company ever did. And that's why we're, 100 times more valuable than those companies ever became. And I think what's exciting about that is it had nothing to do with proving ourselves outside of it's just the right thing to do. And so, I now find myself reaching out to people who've been around a long time, just asking how they are. Rich and I do a welcome call with every new employee class. We spend an hour with them. We ask them who they are, where they're from, favorite travel destination. We just want to get to know them. And then we tell them that there's an open office policy here, that they can Slack us anytime. And don't be strangers. And they are strangers. They never Slack us. But occasionally we'll hear from one of them. And it's like, yes, they reached out to us. What can I do? How can I help? Because that's just who we are. And so those are two little examples, to be honest with you. But there were ones that sort of left a mark. I've had conversations with folks where we thought they were great hires. And then we double tapped in their reaction where they went to go resign, and the company that they were previously were like, oh, I'll double your salary. And then they decide to stay. But yet the entire time they were talking to us, they're like, I can't stand this place. I got to get out of here. I don't like my boss. And so what's amazing is you'll see the individual who quits for the right reason. And then you'll see the individuals who don't quit because it's money driven. And we've figured out, at least in my life, in my own personal situation, it's so much more. We live a third of our lives sleeping, another third of our lives at work, and then the last is living. And I really do believe that you should be inspired by what you do for that third. And it should cross over into your personal life to some degree and influence, or at least have some shared belief systems in both that make you feel and want to get you up out of bed and walk down the stairs into your remote office.
Yeah, I really love that. And I also love the obvious culture of travel that you guys have imbued. What implications are there? And, part of the reason I'm asking this is because I just signed an employment agreement at Salesforce that says I'm not allowed to be out of the country for 30 days consecutively, for more than 30 days consecutively. Like operating, you mentioned some things like time zones. What do you have to consider when you're really running a global organization on the people management side of things? What are some things when all of a sudden you started to have people in South America and people in Europe and people traveling around South Asia and working for you, that it's like, okay, we might need to evolve some of our processes and systems, now that this is the game that we're playing?
Yeah. So I think it's oftentimes a misconception that you can go work from anywhere at any time with Cloudbeds. That doesn't exist. You need a requisite and you need approval from your boss to go travel the world. The same 30-day outside of the country applies at Cloudbeds, right? You just can't get up and be like, hey, I'm going to work from Hong Kong for the next 6 months, even though my team operates in London. That's not a lot of time zone coverage. And the reality, like, oh, no, I'm going to work the hours to make sure that there's overlap. It's like, no, you're not. You're not going to do that very long because you're going to burn out. So there has to be operational efficiency, and there has to be the ability to get shit done, because that's why we show up to work. We actually have to make a business. We have to grow that business, have shareholders and whatnot. So we're very strict around that, actually. And that's because we have to be, right? And so if I hire someone to be in Switzerland, I expect them to be at least in that time zone. If they don't need to operate in Switzerland necessarily, if they can be in that same time zone and work well. But we have to go through the sort of normal process of mobility. And we think about mobility and how it affects us. The other thing is, when we got bigger, the fear of missing out, FOMO, became really serious inside remote companies. And so we had to create a people parity law. And that rule is really about treating people equally. Now, that doesn't mean you don't adjust it to cost of living or standards of living and things like that. into different markets. So like I might compensate someone who's a PM in the United States X, and then it might be 25% different or higher or lower in another country because the cost of living adjustment, right? That's not treating people inequitably, right? It's just treating them fair is the primary purpose of how we think about comp. And so what we did do is we never benefited or gave things to certain populations that we didn't give to somewhere else, right? So if we force someone in an office, we have to force everyone into an office. We wouldn't just let San Diego be the only one to work in the office and say everyone else can work from remote. We don't think that's fair. We don't advertise the events that we do in San Diego on public Slack channels. We don't. If we did have a party or a birthday or a happy hour or things like that, we'll show the happy hour, but we don't show what we don't try to make people feel like they're missing out because they're not by corporate, or they're not by our Barcelona team, or they're not by our Sao Paulo team. And so we try to create equality in the way we advertise our teams, the way we communicate and whatnot. To be honest with you, it just means we over-index on communication, right? And we'll do a quick little exercise because I think it's amazing. And I just learned this from an amazing executive coach. But he talked to me about how senior leaders are the chief communication officers of a company, right? And what we say is contextually taken the right way or contextually taken the wrong way. And so as an experiment, if I said Apple with no other context, Scott, what would you say? What's the first thing that comes to mind? MacBook. Andre, what about you?
Computers.
Cool. So my wife said red. My VP of people said green. My head of sales said jobs. And my VP of partnership said Apple Travel Company, because that's where he worked first. And so our lives actually impact our answers. And so without context, you're going to just answer that in your way. You're going to interpret it, what I said, in your way of, could be your upbringing, it could be a past experience or whatnot. So imagine 750 people in 46 different countries with cultural language as first language, second language, third language, you name it. And when I say Apple, it's going to go into a million directions. And so remote is about trying to go is narrowly focused in what we mean every time we communicate, every time we act, what it means, how it gets inferred. And we over-index on that a lot. And we have really tried to hone in on the way we communicate across the map. How about that?
That's such a simple but powerful example that I think is really resonant for any leader. And I appreciate you sharing that. Here's a question that I love to ask every founder. What was the biggest inflection point in your guys' business?
I think when we acquired our first business, it was My Allocator. We had just raised $2 million and we spent an exorbitant amount of that in cash to buy this company on a percentage basis of our like only is our first raise. We're like, hey, we found a company. We're going to go basically use all of our cash to go buy this company. No, we didn't use all of our cash, but the point is we ate into our runway really quickly. It unlocked conversations with potential customers. It became this strategic offensive and defensive engine for Cloudbeds that we never anticipated. It became one of the greatest ROIs for the organization from a revenue perspective. I mean, we've made 20, 30, 40x on that transaction over the last 7 years. And I would do it all day, every day, over not one regret in anything we did along the way with that. But that move was nuts, absolutely stinking nuts at the time. And it made us who we are today, for sure.
Wow. I mean, yeah, that you don't often hear. First off, I imagine you guys didn't, if you were raising $2 million, like you're probably a lot smaller than you were today in terms of people, profit, etc. And then to make a big move like that, like you have to have a ton of conviction that this is going to work.
We at the time had an amazing amount of conviction, but the business model that we thought was going to work we abandoned like 6 weeks into it. And so we basically went in saying, hey, what we told you, board, is not going to work out of further review. So we're just going to sassify this thing. And in hindsight, it worked out fine long term. But it was one of those things where we got like 8 out of the 10 things right. But those 2 things we didn't get right were the whole thing we sold to the board, right? Those were the most important things. And even then they still said it was, we underpaid and we didn't underpay, but like it's so valuable to us. And it is literally what keeps us separate from the rest of the pack. And it's transformed from where it was then to now. But my God, I remember like hand shaking when we were going to sign the doc, it's like the definitive agreements. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And yet here we are today.
Wow. That's amazing. I love that. Well, Adam, just to kind of wrap this up, I mean, what's next for Cloudbeds? What are you most excited about in your business between now and the end of the year?
So, there's some amazing tailwinds that are in our industry that I'm just appreciative for. So one thing is, I think this is going to be the year of the GOAT for travel, the greatest of all travel trips, right? I keep hearing that terminology. People are going to go out there and spend more money than they've spent on a trip in a long time. And that's because we've been locked up. I mean, here's a fun fact. The luggage sales in the UK are up 190% year over year, right? Just absurd, because those Brits, man, they got it bad, right? They were stuck in their houses for 2+ years. And so they're ready to get back out there. So that's really exciting. The second thing is I've become a dad for the second time this summer. I'm really excited for that one too. That one's a little scary. I'm going to have a daughter. Terrified as well, because it's just one of those things. I know what I am, and in terms of being a boy, and I have a boy already, and so now I'm going to get into a whole new arena. But the thing that I find fascinating about both sort of new beginnings is travel is not going to look the same ever again. COVID changed it. It's experience driven. It's a little more high touch, but less touch in the sense that there's less staff working at properties. Some of those amenities that we're used to are gone. They will never come back. Like, I'm doubtful any one of us on this call will care if they don't change your sheets every night. I don't change my sheets at my house every night. So why do I need my sheets changed every night or my towels changed? But travel is going to begin to become much more about where you're going and why, and then how the property intersects with that journey. And so just like, adding a little girl to my life that I have no idea what I'm doing with, I'm kind of excited for what that looks like and how that grows and how that transpires into what I hope is an amazing adult in the future and contributor to society. But like, our generation of new travelers were born after 79. So the largest population of travelers were born after 79. They've, the average 18-year-old has had an iPhone their entire freaking life. So like the way we experience travel starts now in a new way. And that just, I'm so pumped to be part of what that's going to look like over the next 2 decades.
That's awesome. On so many levels, congrats on early congrats, I guess, on the imminent being a girl dad. That sounds like a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I agree with what people care about has evolved, and people want really cool, amazing experiences. And that usually is tied to some deeper meaning or activity or something that's beyond, just having a nicely made bed. And it's really cool that you guys get to be such a partner to these people in the hotels that make these experiences possible. So we're really excited. And man, now I want to know, like, how can I tell if someone's using Cloudbeds? Because I'm about to rip some travel myself this summer, and I want to make sure that if they're using Cloudbeds, I can say, hey, I know those guys.
Yeah. So great question. Ask when you get to the front desk. If you need to go to the front desk to check in, you should definitely ask. I've started to see more and more people that I know be like, I just stayed at a Cloudbeds property. I'm like, how did you know? They're like, when I booked on their website, the URL changed to Cloudbeds. And I was like, God, that's so freaking cool. So if you're in Central America or Latin, I mean, we're pretty much everywhere. So there is a chance, Scott, that you get out there now. If you book through booking.com or Expedia or Airbnb or one of those, it might get obfuscated a little bit because it will redirect to us. But for the sake of the hoteliers, go directly to their website, book direct. Do that because it's cheaper for them and they'll feel good about that.
Good pro tip for everybody out there taking a trip this summer. Well, Adam, this has been epic. Thank you so much. Congrats on building an amazing business, and just love a lot of the wisdom and ideas that you shared with us today.
My pleasure, guys. This has been a blast. Thanks for having me.